With the amount of injuries that are piling up and the amount of backups you're having to play in flex spots, in running back spots, in wide receiver spots, you will never see the importance of defense more than you are seeing it right now. That can be the difference in who wins in a particular week. So, of course, every week I go through top 12 defense rankings. We're doing that for week 7 today. And I'm one of the only fantasy YouTubers who does defense multiple times a week to give you that edge. So please go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Now, get into our first tier. I've got the Patriots defense this week at number 1, and they're going to Tennessee to play the Titans. So there's a couple different factors into this one. First of all, Tennessee is in complete shambles right now. Now, they fired their coach, Brian Callahan, who I always thought was way over his skis. I never thought that he was going to be the right coach for Cam Ward. And of course, it turns out he was not the right coach. But the reality is this organization is truly horrendous. They have been on a hamster wheel of coaches and GMs for several years straight since the departure of Mike Vrabel. And that's the second factor to this, is Mike Vrabel is in a revenge game right now. You know for a fact, Mike Vrabel is a vengeance type of guy. He wants to go into Tennessee, remind them of who they cut and who they let go, and absolutely pound them into the ground. Tennessee can't move the ball very well. And Cam Ward, as much as I liked him pre-draft, the reality is when you're a young quarterback and you go into a bad situation with already bad talent and now your coach is gone, it's really hard to recover in the span of 1 week to being a competent offense. The Patriots defense additionally has done really well in fantasy football. They are the number 8 fantasy defense right now, 13 sacks, 4 interceptions, 4 forced fumbles. They're making plays happen. There's no way this one doesn't do well. At number 2, I've got the Chiefs defense, and they're taking on the Raiders this week in Kansas City. So a couple of things we've been learning about the Chiefs lately is that the Chiefs, number 1, their offense is back. Patrick Mahomes looks really good, but also additionally what's kind of going under the radar is how well Kansas City's defense is playing. Now, in a fantasy football perspective, they play plenty of tough teams, and they're not getting super amount of big splash plays to make them a top 10 fantasy defense. They're the defense number 18 in fantasy football right now, but the Raiders is the perfect remedy for exactly getting a good fantasy performance, because the Raiders are turnover happy. I mean, Geno Smith, even though they beat the Titans last week, that's only because it was the Titans. They are not good offensively still, and they're just not doing well offensively enough for me to overlook this one and say Kansas City can't be good in fantasy. They will be good in fantasy this week because they just played the Lions and really put a cap on that upside of that offense. So I have no questions about who's going to win this game for sure and who will come out on top defensively, and that will be the Kansas City Chiefs. And at number 3 to round out this tier, I've got the Seahawks defense, and they're taking on Houston this week on a Monday night at home. Now, there's a couple different things with this one. First of all, the Texans coming off a bye week, in theory, should be a good thing for that offense. Like, maybe we'll see the Houston offense come out and their receivers evolve because those are young players, and maybe some of them do better this week. I just don't think it's going to happen this week against the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. Like, that is one of the toughest places to play across the entire league, and this is the defense number 1 in fantasy we're talking about here. 20 sacks and 7 interceptions. So on their front end and on their back end, they're making plays left and right. That secondary, they might pick off CJ Stroud, especially if they get the Texans in a hole, which I expect them to do. And they're going to get after that offensive line. You can count on that 100% with 20 sacks. This is a defense that in any matchup, they're going to be viable and in play as a good defense because that's how dominant they've been this year, but especially against the Texans' offensive line this week, I see a lot of sacks in this game for the Seahawks. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got the Panthers defense. I know, but you know they've got to be here when they're going to the Jets. And the Jets, like the Titans, are in complete shambles. Like, Aaron Glenn may get fired in a couple of games. This team looks awful. I mean, if you didn't watch the London game, which I wouldn't blame you if you didn't, I watched it because it's part of my job to watch these games. That Jets team made one of the most embarrassing coaching mistakes, make no mistake, when he went forward on a 4th down on a fake punt and then proceeded to let the clock drain for halftime. It was so embarrassingly bad. He's losing the team. And that's something you cannot overlook. And on top of that, his star player, Garrett Wilson, is expected to miss time. There's no way the Jets are moving the ball, even against the Panthers. They may move the ball and get 2 touchdowns, but I think that's the cap. And I think the Panthers' defense has been so bad, there's not really much to highlight with them in a fantasy football perspective. But I will say this. They're probably not as bad as you think they are in fantasy football. They're the defense number 23 right now in fantasy, and mostly because they got a defensive touchdown, but this defense I just don't see not having a good day against one of the most atrocious teams in the NFL, the New York Jets. Panthers at 4. The Rams are at 5, and they're going overseas to take on the Jags, and the same thing with the Jags defense. I think they've got to be at 6. So here's the thing that we've learned through not just this year, but previous years past. If you looked overseas games, those offenses are always sluggish, and if you just think about it, it makes a lot of sense. These offenses, they're going to a completely new environment with new turf, new field conditions. They've got overseas matchups, which means the time change is significantly different. It's a completely different situation. So it throws off the rhythm of any offense. So I think last week, the Broncos and the Jets is the perfect example of that because the Broncos offense is better than what we just saw. But they weren't better because of that overseas game. The Rams offense is better than what I think we will see, but without Puka Nacua in all likelihood, the Jags defense will have advantages here to take advantage of. And additionally, the Jags also have been known to play overseas a lot. They usually play overseas at least once a year. So I think the Jags are in this unique spot where they actually could win this game, but the Rams defense, I do still like them too, because again, it screws up on any offense. And the Rams defense is really good for fantasy, additionally, including the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Rams defense has 19 sacks compared to the Jags' 8 sacks. The Jags, though, they have 10 interceptions, and that's really what's getting them the bacon here. So they're counting on an interception probably from Matt Stafford. Their pass rush just isn't good enough to get after him. But I will say this, I think that both defenses are completely in play, and these overseas matchups, you've got to bump down those offensive options in fantasy and bump up those defensive options in fantasy football. And I actually think that both of these defenses are on plenty of waiver wires this week because of recent matchups. So if I was you, I would be utilizing our automatic waiver wire tool to go pick up your defense this week, because always what happens is there's a mad dash after the initial priority waiver claims run in the middle of the night to go grab the rest of the best players. And what our tool does is you get to beat all those other guys that are going after those players. In the middle of the night, you can sleep through the night and still piss off your league mates who wake up that early to go get those players, because our automatic waiver tool will grab them for you as long as you put a claim in on it.
This is Ted. Look at him. Ted desperately needs to pick up a new running back, or his fantasy team is toast. For the 3rd year in a row. And losing his season again means one thing. Don't be Ted. Use Fantasy Football Roundup to automate your waiver pickups and take a breather this season.
Hey, you got 7 more laps.
Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got the Dolphins defense surprisingly as well at number 7, but they're only because they're going to Cleveland to take on the Browns. So we've got a couple bad defenses in here. The Dolphins defense is not good. The Panthers defense is not good, but matchup is so big for fantasy defenses. And I will tell you this. I got to watch every single snap of Dillon Gabriel live on Sunday against the Steelers, and I got to tell you, it was one of the saddest things I've ever watched in my entire life, if you want to know the truth. Dillon Gabriel is a shrimp, so he can't see over his linemen a lot of times over the middle of the field, which leads to him throwing hospital balls, and it also leads to him putting the ball in harm's way. This guy is not a good decision maker. He's not big enough to see a lot of things over the middle of the field, and he has no feel for the pocket. This guy is going to get pounded if the Miami Dolphins can generate any kind of pass rush with some of those front 7 pieces that they do have. They have 12 sacks this year because they've got some good pass rushers, and they're also going to be in a position to where the Dolphins are really playing for not only their season but their coach. So we will find out a lot about if the Dolphins care about Mike McDaniels whatsoever. whatsoever, and I believe that they'll win against the Cleveland Browns because the Browns are in this position to where, again, Dylan Gabriel is not good, but they also just don't put up many points. So I think that they will be in this position to where they're going to take advantage of the matchup, and even if they don't get a turnover or two off the Browns, they will be able to hold them to 13, 16 points because the Browns offense is just not good enough to move the ball enough down the field. The Broncos defense is at 8, and they're taking on the Giants. Listen, the Giants offense is absolutely one to watch. Like, they in theory should not be as good as they are, and they shouldn't have put up 30 points against the Eagles because they're missing Malik Neighbors. They're missing some offensive line pieces. They're missing some more pieces at wide receiver with Darius Slayton out. Now, maybe they get him back this week. They basically had a mini bye week, which I think really benefits them. And Denver's coming back home. That's a tough place to play as well. And the Broncos defense, of course, is very good in fantasy football. The Broncos defense has 30 sacks this year. They're the league leader in sacks, so I expect them to get after Jackson Dart. It's a really tough spot for Dart to play in, but I got to tell you, momentum and confidence are a powerful thing. That's the reason the Broncos aren't ranked higher, because I still do see the Giants offense being able to move and generate points based off the momentum and the confidence that they have right now behind Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo. So I like the Broncos defense this week. Don't love them this week, though. And the Browns defense is at 9 to round out this tier versus the Dolphins again. This matchup should provide opportunities because the Dolphins are on the verge of firing their head coach too. They're in shambles as well. They're having players not show up to meetings per Tua Tagovailoa and Mike McDaniel's own accounts. So, this is not a team that really respects that head coach too much. And the Browns defense, I will give them credit. They've done what they can. Given their offense is how bad as they are, they have done what they can. And the Dolphins can put up points, but the other thing is that Tua is throwing interception after interception after interception. So it's not like Tua is playing good football this year. There's plenty of opportunity here for the Cleveland Browns to come up with some turnovers, get some sacks on Tua Tagovailoa. The offensive line already isn't that good. So I expect them to get a couple turnovers, a couple sacks off of Tua, while also giving up probably 20 points. I do think it'll be good enough, though, with those turnovers and with those sacks to be a top 10 production defense-wise in fantasy this week. So the Browns are at 9. And dropping down to our last tier, I've got the Steelers defense this week at number 10, and they're taking on Cincinnati on Thursday night. If this year has taught us anything, do not overrank Thursday night defenses. In fact, I'd go as far as to say you have to underrank them. If it was not a Thursday night game, the Steelers would be in the top 10, top 5 potentially. This defense is doing very, very well. They got out to the Browns a bunch last week. They've got 20 sacks on the year. They've got 5 interceptions. They've got 6 forced fumbles. The Steelers always come up with the big plays necessary to have a good fantasy day. But Mike Tomlin's record on Thursday nights, not very good, and it's in Cincinnati, and they got Joe Burrow, who the Steelers have seen a bunch over the years, but I have a feeling that the Steelers are going to let up defensively because every defense has done that since the start of the year. Any defense you don't want to play on Thursday nights, but given the matchup and given the success and given the splash plays, the Steelers, I think, will make enough plays in the splash plays to be able to be a top 10 defense this week, but they're in the last tier. Make no mistake about this one. The Eagles defense is at 11, and they're going to Minnesota to take on the Vikings, and the Vikings defense is at 12. So I don't know what to think about this game, because the Eagles are reeling, offensively particularly, but their defense also looked awful this past week. Now, again, Thursday nights, that complicates things. I don't think they're that bad, but they're losing pieces. Quinyon Mitchell left that game. Jalen Carter was out. They've got missing pieces on that Eagles defense to where it bothers me knowing that a couple of their top players are missing out of that lineup. So I do worry about the Eagles defense as a whole, but I do still think that they're good enough to be able to shut down whether it's J.J. McCarthy or Carson Wentz this week. Now, if you look at the comments that Kevin O'Connell has made, it actually would imply that they're probably going to go with Carson Wentz again this week. So if it's J.J. McCarthy, the Eagles would rise up probably into the next tier because of how bad J.J. has been. But if it's Carson Wentz, I'm comfortable with them here at 11 because I don't think they'll score enough points to really put a dent in the Eagles' defensive fantasy day. But the Vikings defense as a whole, they're actually good. And the Eagles' offense is not good right now. And it's so weird because they have so much talent, but the Vikings' defense, I can easily see them coming out here in this game and getting sacks on Jalen Hurts because he's not being well protected right now. Maybe getting some turnovers off this offense because this offense is in shambles right now, make no mistake about it. So the Vikings coming off a bye week, the Eagles coming off a mini bye week. This is a hard game to predict, but I think there's a lot of opportunities in this matchup right here, and that's why both defenses are inside the top 12. So let me know what you think of the rankings this week in the comments below, and if you want to see the trade targets to go get before Week 7 fantasy football, click on this video right here.